Hey guys, it's Swordofpower / melbianinja, and today I'm going to show you how I draw manga style. So, I have 4 different guide circles here, and in each and every one of those circles is going to be a different style of manga. So, the first guide circle that I'm going to be doing is probably going to be more realistic, semi-realistic, more cartoony, or what you might consider more typical manga style, and then this one is going to be extremely cartoony. So, one thing I noticed on the internet is that people tend to want to learn a different kind of style that when they're searching out. So they want to add something to their style or to learn how to do a particular style. So this video might just help you get started on what style you want to pick. And when you look at different kinds of styles or whatever, you can read comic books. So if you have a certain kind of comic book that you like, or looking up comics on the internet, I advise caution when doing that. But you can look up different kinds of comics or pictures that other artists do, and you can look at that and say, well, I like this and this and this, but I want to change this, and then thus start to help develop your style. So before we start, I'm going to show you just a little bit of tools that I like to use to help me out when I do manga drawing just on the pad and paper. So let's get drawing. Okay, so I wanted to explain something real quick, and then we're going to go back in the drawing. Is that you can already see where the guidelines I've put. This is actually a guideline for the nose and the mouth. And when you make a guide circle first, and then you place the jawline, then place the mouth, that will really help you because this little circle at the very end of the circle will be good for placing the mouth. So also you might want to do a third line in here to help you place where the eyes are. So the eyes on a more realistic manga face are super small. Not not super small, but it's still small enough to the point of where you kind of look at it and you're like, what? That doesn't necessarily look like manga because it's not like any manga I've seen. It's they have really small eyes for what you might consider as manga, and it's almost not classified as manga. Sometimes people will look at it and be like, that does not look like manga because it's super realistic, and so they might judge you for doing this style. But you're just like, wait, whatever, it's kind of what I like to do, so I'm gonna do it. And when you place the ears and the eyes inside of the guideline is that the ear actually will start where the eye is. So the very top of the eye, that's where you tend to place your ears. So depending on how large you want your character's ears to be, you can elongate them down to where they become more realistic on terms of like where the face is. So also when you place the neck muscles, depending on what kind of character you're using, let's say boy compared to girl, then on a male person, the neck will actually become thicker, typically, unless you want to have like a bodybuilder girl or whatever. But um, the neck will actually become thicker and more wide as you go. So the thinner it is, typically that depicts feminine, and the more that you elongate it, basically the more thicker you get, the more it looks like a male character. So I'm going to kick it in a time lapse, and so I can add some details, and then I'll come back to explain just a few things before we move on to the next phase. Okay, so here's the finished product. Alright, now let's get drawing the slightly realistic face. Alright, so I'm finished with my slightly realistic face, and I'm going to explain just a couple of things. When you do a slightly realistic face, you notice the eyes do get bigger, but it's not just the amount of the eyes get bigger, um, basically, and the eyebrows are a little bit higher on the head. But the way that they're constructed is a little bit different than what you might consider the realistic style. They are a little bit bigger, but they're also slightly more rectangular, I suppose. Like the iris itself is more rectangular, and the actual head itself, it looks more childlike, I suppose. They look more young. That's one thing about manga, is that manga tends to make people look younger. The more realistic you draw a character, sometimes they can be mistaken for being an older character the more realistic that they're drawn. Okay, let's get drawing the very cartoony face. Okay, so I'm going to explain just one little thing about what you might consider the more typical manga style. So, there's probably some people in the audience who are watching this and like, yeah, that looks a little bit more like manga. And yeah, actually it does, because this is a very typical, what you might consider typical cartoony manga style. But there are a lot of people who every single one of them draws differently. And that's one amazing thing that I figured out, is the power of the human mind that creates so many different styles depending on what people's preferences are, likes, hobbies. This is probably more what you might call a shoujo style. So for people who don't know that, shoujo means uh, girls manga, basically. And shonen, actually, my preferred style is probably shonen, leaning on the shonen style. Shonen is a more what you might call a boys manga. So shoujo is girls manga, shonen is boys manga, and you also have bishojo and bishonen, which bishojo is beautiful um, girl, basically beautiful girls manga, like older women, and bishojo bishonen is I think beautiful guy, or handsome, attractive looking guy. I think it's so in those different. There's a couple different categories in which there's much different kinds of manga styles, but the story itself, if you want to create a more serious like story, I suggest going for the more realistic style of manga if you want that mode of seriousness in your story. But of course, I mean, depends on what you like to draw. I mean, I'm not going to dictate, you must draw in this style if you're going to do this kind of story, ma. So, I'm not going to be doing that to you. I'm just giving you a couple suggestions of what you might find in typically different kinds of stories. This style of manga, basically, it can range into a lot of different kinds of stories, but you have just a couple unique things about this style that I find kind of funny. Is that there's only a dot for the nose. Like if you compare these two faces, like you have your two nostrils here, and you have the bridge of the nose and the two nostrils here. However, the what you might consider the typical manga style is that it only has a dot for a nose. and it has 2 highlight points. You can actually have just one if you want, or you can have like 3 or 4. You know, you can go completely over the top with this if you really wanted to. So that's where drawing the extremely cartoony side of manga comes in. So let's get drawing that, and I'll explain just a couple more things. Alright guys, I zoomed out so that you can see all 4 faces, and I'll just explain just a couple of things before I let you guys go. Okay, so in the realistic face, you want to try to keep it as close to real human anatomy as possible. It's not the only way of making realistic. Of course, there's so many different kinds of ways, and besides, this is just one girl character that I did. So you can customize it, any of these grid lines, guidelines, to any style, any kind, anything that you want. So when you take these kinds of ideas, they're just what what I just got done saying, ideas. So keep these things in mind so that whenever you try to attempt some of these styles, you can know what's what in the manga world. So, the thing about the cartoony style is that the ears are very low on the face compared to here. See how the ears start from the eye and then go down to the nose? These actually start probably halfway and are really low on the jaw. They're actually on the jaw. And the thing about the big-eyed style especially is that it's easy to mess up. So I'm also really sorry to any manga fans who look at it and they're like, "What? That does not look like big-eyed style." Well, I'm super sorry because I haven't done a whole lot of characters with super large eyes because that's not my preference. I've done a couple of characters like so over here. So I hope it looks okay, and I hope you guys are satisfied with this video. So just 1 or 2 more things before I let you guys go. The neck also gets thinner. So as you notice, like here's the neck, right here, defined neck, how thick it is on the jaw. Even in female characters, it's sometimes thicker. It's thicker than this, how it gets smaller, and then even smaller on the more alien-looking guy over here, with the eyes the size of satellite dishes. So, anyway, the shading on the eyes as well is also a very important key factor. So the more that basically you shade it, the more darker it is. The more darker the character's eyes are. No, really. But if you want to shade them really dark, like this guy here, he might have brown to black eyes, whereas these guys here, like this, probably this guy, he or she, depending on how you make it, will probably have something maybe green eyes or blue eyes because of the shading that is involved. Um, when you get bigger eyes, you have to work on the details of every single thing. So the more bigger the eyes are, the more harder it is to do the eyes because of how many manga fans out there are discerning. That does not look like manga, that does look like manga. You could work on this and this and this. And then there's the haters who are just like, no! But anyway, so thank you guys. I hope that this video was good enough for you, and I'll see you guys again.